In this tutorial you'll see how you can change the default flow of web pages or even steps within those web pages in order to simulate what happens in the real world. It's obvious when you think of our example of a bookshop that not all users go to the home page, perform a search, immediately see the book of interest, look at it, add it to the shopping cart and then check out. Simulating that would not be simulating the real world, and therefore the results that you get from the performance test would be somewhere between meaningful, but not totally meaningful, and meaningless. It's key therefore that you think about the different flows through your user journey that will happen within the real world. The facility to change the default flow within the user journey within StressTester is called flow control. So if I look at the previous user journey I've been working on, that is browsing and buying for books, I can see that there's a web page that does a search for books, entering a parameter that varies the search term. The next web page will view a book, and again this is parameterized to pick a book at random from the response from the search. However, let's consider the situation where the user doesn't see the book that they were looking for, and therefore they might go back and do another search, they might go back to the home page, or they might actually leave the website. To change the default flow, i.e. that the user would just go to the Add to Cart web page, you use the flow control area of the step screen. You will see that the default flow control on any page is to go to the next step. However, there are other types of flow control that can be specified. The common ones are fixed loop, which allows you to go back to a previous page a certain number of times. So for example, after looking at a book's details, I could go back to the search for books page twice more. If I wish to, I can specify an additional sleep time that will actually occur before going back to the search for books page again. More common is a variable loop. Again, I want my users to go back and do another search, but I wish them to go back between 0 and 2 times. What this means is that when StressTester for a simulated user gets to this point within the user journey, it will pick a value at random of 0, 1 or 2 and loop back to the search for books page that number of times. A further type, which is commonly used, is to vary where the user goes depending on the response of the page. It can be the response of the current page represented by this step or of a previously executed one. So, if we consider the situation where as part of the book details page you actually see the message saying book currently out of stock, it is obvious I don't want my simulated users, when that response is returned, to try to add the book to the cart, and therefore it makes sense to configure that the users go somewhere else at this point. I can go back and do another search, or could return to the home page. There are also two special flow destinations. End cycle. This simulated user will not run any more web pages or steps within this user journey, but will go back to the start of the user journey and run again, i.e. it will start another cycle. End user. This simulated user will not issue any more requests during this performance test, so effectively the load on the system reduces by 1. I want to simulate that when the book that was viewed is out of stock, the user leaves the site. However, I want to keep steady load on this site, so I would choose end cycle. Again, I can specify a sleep time that occurs before the flow happens. The final common type is percentage based. This allows me to specify a certain percent of users will go to a certain flow destination at the end of this step. So I could say that 50% of users on viewing the book details will go back and do another search. 30% will actually end the cycle. That's simulating a user that does not wish to purchase this book, so leaves the site. However, I want to keep the load steady on the system during the performance test. And the remaining 20% will go and add the book to the cart. When I'm happy with my flow control, I click Save. You will see that alongside the web page name within the navigation tree the blue split arrow has appeared. This gives you a visual reference that that step has flow control configured upon it. It is very important to think about the alternative flows that will occur within your user journey and use StressTester to configure your user journey so it simulates what will happen in the real world as closely as possible.